Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the F Word. Presented by Melbourne Playback Theatre Company. My name is Rachael. I'm an ensemble member of the company. I'm the creative director of this event, and I'm also your MC tonight. We gather this evening on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I offer my respect to the Wurundjeri, to their elders and their ancestors, and I extend that respect to all First Nations people here this evening. Stories have been told right here on this land for tens of thousands of years, and women have lived and grown and led on this land for tens of thousands of years. And tonight we're making a space to reflect on our stories and our journey as women and with women. There is a panel of 4 incredible women who are going to join me on stage very shortly. We're going to hear from them, and then we're going to open up to a Q&A discussion with you all. And then I'm going to hand over to Alex Sangster and a team of fantastic female actors and musicians who will guide us through a playback theatre show which will harness more of the stories in the room. How does that sound?
Wonderful.
Great. Now, if you're a Twitterer, there is a hashtag which is up here, the F Word 2016. It's also on pieces of paper around the room. Let's welcome our panel onto the stage. Please welcome Clementine Ford, Melba Murchison, Tammy Anderson, and Jane Gilmour. So our first panellist this evening is Jane Gilmour. Jane is the former editor of Women's Agenda, an online media platform for career-focused women. She's also the founding editor of the King's Tribune and is a regular contributor with Daily Life and The Hoopla, among many other publications. Please welcome Jane Gilmour.
Thank you. So I'm supposed to apparently talk to you about my journey with feminism, which is an interesting story. I would love to be able to say I had a great road to Damascus moment, or I sprang fully grown from the brain of Roxane Gay, a fully formed feminist knowing everything. But of course I didn't. It was mostly a series of a whole lot of things that I wasn't expecting, that I didn't know how they happened, and I look back and went, how the hell did that happen? But okay, here we go, carry on. So I came to feminism quite late because I was growing up in the 90s and we were too busy with grunge and existential angst to worry about anything else. And then all of a sudden I was a single mother with 2 children under 3, and wow, did that escalate quickly. But there I was, and I had no money and no job, and I thought, well, I should probably do something about this. So I decided to go to university and become an accountant, because that's what you do. I was really sleep deprived and it made sense at the time. So I did that. So for 7 years, I was pretty much didn't have time to think about anything else. I was, when's my next essay due? What are we going to eat tonight? Yes, you need to wear shoes. That went on for 7 years, and that was all I had time to think about. And then I graduated as a qualified accountant and became a consultant in the energy industry, because of course that's what you do when you're an accountant. And then all of a sudden I was just thrown into this world that was just entirely male-dominated. For the entire decade I was doing that, I think I was the only woman in the room every time except maybe twice. And so for that entire 10 years, and it wasn't just men, it was white men in suits. There was no men of colour, there was no men with disabilities, there were no queer men, it was white men in suits. Lots of swinging dicks and egos. It was really all it was. And that was when I started to come to feminism, and it wasn't about the swinging dicks, it was about me. Because I had to turn up and prove every day that I could do the job that I was really, really good at. There was a guy that was working with me who was junior to me in every way. He was younger, less experienced, less qualified, less able, less skilled. The number of times I had to explain that I'm not his assistant, he's mine, to the same person several times, over and over again. Because, of course, you're a woman, you must be somebody's assistant, otherwise what are you doing here, and I'll have a latte, please. That kind of thing went on and on. So feminism started just being about me. It was about me and what was happening to me, and I embraced choice feminism. This is my choice. I will wear what I want to wear and do what I want to do. And the patriarchy was about the men that were stopping me doing that. So that all went well for a while, and then I started again, because when you're a consultant in the energy industry, the natural progression is to become a journalist concentrating on feminism. Again, I don't know how that happened. It just did, and there I was. And so I started reading more about it and talking to more people and finding friends and learning more. And so I started to learn a bit more about feminist theory, which was okay for a while. And then I really started thinking about it. Feminist theory is about equality, equal rights with men. Equality, equality, equality. You know when you say a word over and over again and it loses its meaning? Equality doesn't actually have any meaning. Equal to what? If we're all equal to Joe Hockey, does that mean we've won? If we're all Andrew Bolt? Ooh, no, I don't want that. If women are as violent as men, if women are incarcerated at the same rate as men, if we suicide at the same rate as men, is that equality? What does it even mean? It doesn't mean anything. And so slowly feminism stopped being a theory and it became a movement, a collective movement, not towards equality but towards liberation, which was liberation from the confines of gender roles. So all the things that kept women oppressed, which is basically about female poverty and male violence, it's all about the gender roles. And the easiest way I found to think about that was the pay gap, which we're told is 18%. It's not. 18% is the difference between full-time earnings of men and women salaried in 2013-14. If you actually take the total amount of money earned by men in that year compared to the total amount of money earned by women in that year, the gender pay gap is over 50%. That's because when they do 18%, they're comparing full-time to full-time because they say you have to compare like to like. And it's not a level playing field. There is no like to like. If you take all women, 70% of the people that work part-time are women. Why? Because women stay home and look after babies because we're all nurturing. I'm not particularly, just ask my children, they're around here somewhere. Somewhere. Usually how I work with my kids, they're around somewhere. So it was when I started to understand those gender roles and understand feminism as a collective movement and understand that it's not about me. I'm not free unless all women are free. I am not liberated unless all women are liberated. And then again, the journey becomes wider, your world gets bigger and you understand more about other women's journeys. And I started getting really angry with men. I think everybody who's a feminist goes through that moment where you're just really angry. Just fucking stop it. Just stop. Why do you keep doing this? Stop. And then I had this understanding of where I started learning more about Aboriginal women and the experience of Aboriginal people in Australia. And I started getting a bit upset about it because I'm a feminist and an ally, and where's my pat on the head and my milk and cookies? Well, no, I don't get them, because while I personally may not have committed atrocities, I'm the beneficiary of the people that did, as is everybody living in Australia. And the only way to make up for that is to stand back and make room and say, we took so much, here's some of the space back. Here is a voice, here is a platform, here is some of the things that I have that you should have. And I didn't want to, because I worked really hard for what I've got and I didn't want to give it up. And then I realised that's what it's like for men. That's what I demand of men. I demand that they are the beneficiaries of thousands of years of atrocities, really. It's time to step back, make room, let women in. But that's what what white women have to do for women of colour, women with disabilities, queer women. We are the beneficiaries of atrocity against them. And so it gets complicated because you have to accept that and be willing to step back. Volunteer to step back, push other women forward who need it. And it feels unfair. And so now I understand a bit more about why men resist so much, because they feel that they're being hard done by, and in a way they are. I don't particularly care, but they do have to give something up. So they should, it's time. So then again, feminism changed again for me and it became something less immediate. A lot of the anger's gone now and it's the long view. It's not just me, it's not even just all women now, it's all the women coming after me, all the little girls, their daughters, because change takes a really long time. And change is going to take a really long time. We've come a long way in 200 years. It might take another 200 years to get there, but we won't get there unless we all keep fighting. So it strengthened the need to not ever give up and lessen the frustration. So basically, to sum up, feminism for me has been a series of realising that I was wrong about everything, which is actually really comforting. I would like to know that it's going to keep going like that in 10 years' time I'll look back on everything I've said to you tonight and think, wow, I just didn't get it at all, did I? And then be able to say again, I hope one day I'm on a walking frame going, I just was so wrong. When I was 70, I was so wrong. And look at what I've learned. I hope that's what feminism will be for me. I think it's different for everybody, but that was my perspective on it. So thank you for listening.
Our next panellist is Melba Marginson. Melba is the Executive Director of the Victorian Immigrant and Refugee Women's Coalition. She's been working in the area of multicultural women's affairs since she migrated to Australia from the Philippines 25 years ago. She was inducted into the Victorian Women's Honour Roll for her work on violence against refugee and immigrant women. Please welcome Melba Marginson.
Feminism. Good evening, sisters and a few brothers. My story is not, I'd say there are a lot of sad stuff there, but anyway, I'll try to be, upbeat. I came here in 1989, but before I came here, my feminism started in the national democratic struggle in the Philippines. As you know, we toppled a dictator, Ferdinand Marcos, in 1986. So I was very much involved in the national democratic struggle in the Philippines. I was, in fact, a member of the Communist Party for many years, and I just got out of it when I was already here. But in the party, we all started questioning if we win the revolution in the Philippines, will we be able to also, as women, gain a lot out of it? But you see what happened to China anyway. Okay, so you can have a big national revolution, but gender revolution is not going to follow yet, isn't it? As we know. So I came here already steeped with ideas about feminism, and I did have my own bit of struggle with men in the Philippines in terms of the leadership in the organizations that I was part of. I came here as part of. I was a speaker at the National Conference of the Australian Teachers Federation, and there I met a guy that swept me off my feet. Of course, an Australian national, and so I fell in love, and that started it. I came here after the whole story about the Australian embassy, and it's they're so freaked out about the health, the medical conditions of migrants coming into Australia. That's another entire story. But it was so sad. I was not able to, even if we married in the Philippines, I was not able to join my husband immediately because of some problems with the Australian embassy. But anyway, I got here nonetheless. And guess what? The first big activity that I attended, a Filipino activity, was the funeral of a Filipino woman who was strangled to death by her Maltese Australian husband. That was in 1989. Okay? So I met in the funeral many Filipino women, who were looking so lost, but also those who I know were doing a lot in terms of helping the others. Being an organizer myself, as you know, it didn't take me long to actually connect the groups that I met in that funeral, as well as those that I met in different states and territories eventually. And so I set up an organization called Center for Philippine Concerns Australia, which actually campaigned for the protection of Filipino women, from family violence. That's why I'm going to tell you, you're just a small crowd, but, the fight for domestic violence in this country started in 1989, with Filipino women campaigning, for protection of those that we have found to be victims of murders. We documented 18 murders and a few disappearances during that time. And I brought it up to the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission so that they can do a Royal Commission inquiry into the killings, because it's really scandalous. In fact, they did they did their findings. They came to us and did a big research into all the cases that we have. And they really have found that the Filipino women in Australia, were 27.7% more likely to be victims of homicide, in that time. But then, of course, when they looked, and they did a comparison with Aboriginal women, but when they also looked at the Aboriginal women were 34.8%, most likely to become victims of homicide. So, comparisons of those two, that just gives you an idea how intense already at that time, the issue of family violence was. Of course, we tried our best, and the good news is, as a result of our campaign, the people, the bureaucrats in the Department of Immigration were so scandalized, including, of course, Jerry Hand, the then Minister Jerry Hand, that eventually they came up with a legislation which is now called which was then called the Domestic Violence Provision to Immigration Act, and then updated to be called now the Family Violence Provision. What it did, it helps thousands and thousands of women who come here, from overseas. When they become victims of domestic violence, they do not have to be sponsored, but by their sponsoring perpetrators, usually. They can actually lodge, their permanent residency to the government, and they can get it in due time if they have all the evidences. So many immigrant women, actually were able to get permanent residency as a result of that. Now, I told you my feminist views were framed by my experience in the national democratic struggle in the Philippines. But in here, it was even more enriched, because here the issue of race, came on board. I found myself attending meetings, women's meetings, conferences, where often I was the only colored woman, because I networked a lot. I want to be part, of the ongoing women's movement. And really, it was hard to be heard. I found myself being a token, most of the time. So I graduated from setting up the Filipino organization called Center for Philippine Concerns to founding, with a few immigrant women, the organization that I'm now an executive director of, the Victorian Immigrant and Refugee Women's Coalition. Because we realized, we have to band together, and that we are all women, and we're all from overseas, and we're experiencing the same, problems here. So, having founded that organization, I had to grapple with so many difficulties to be heard, as an advocate, as a lobbyist, you face politicians, and they will be so courteous to you, and looking like they were really listening, but they will not do anything. You know that. Sometimes they will send even their researchers, to speak to you, but it will not get you anywhere. Okay? So now we are continuing, as of now, we are still struggling finding, the funding, that will really get the organization to achieve more. But look, what we have set up is an organization that is so grassroots based. Okay? I even developed a women's leadership course, 7 days, 35 hours, that is tailored for immigrant refugee women. And we have trained more than 1,000 immigrant and refugee women. Okay? And out of that, we now have around more than 100 women champions, because we call those women who have graduated women champions, and they continue to be part of the organization. And the good news as well is I don't only just see myself now. There are so many other women. In fact, when I give a training, and they ask me, so what are you? Are you an artist? Are you a judge? Are you artist, judge, explorer, or are you a warrior? Well, I often say, well, I am a warrior, because I've been there, done that, and all I need is a cheering squad. And here you are. You are my cheering squad. That's what I'm telling them. Okay? So now I can go around, tell the politicians the stories of our women, bringing some of our women, and now, they will see that I'm not alone anymore. There are so many voices at the grassroots level. We have also developed a model which is called the Women's Friendship Cafe, because and this, you don't have to be a woman from overseas. You can be a woman here and you'd still be isolated, isn't it? Social isolation is everywhere, especially when you getting older. And so we found out that our women, our members, our network of women, would like to have those open, free spaces, safe for women, where they can talk. They can, just be themselves. They can work together, they can knit if they want to, they can do some crafts, and they can also learn with service providers giving them information. So now we have about 14 of those women's friendship cafes, all set up, run by volunteers, immigrant and refugee women, because that's part of their leadership training, that they run their projects, okay? And they recruit more volunteers. So they're now set up, they meet every week, and the ones that are set up probably meet about 150, women and girls, by the way, because those women's friendship cafe, because they're so tailored around the needs of women, the mothers were saying we want our girls to be also, benefiting from this. And so we've set up a girls' friendship club, primarily to empower girls so that they will not be arranged in marriages that they will not want to do, okay? Because we are in touch with a lot of those, networks that are doing arranged marriages to the point that some are forcing, their daughters into early marriages, stopping them from being really educated. So, and that is and I tell everyone, this is our strategy for women and social inclusion. While you have your men's sheds, 2,000 of them nationally funded by the governments, okay? We have 14 here in Victoria, not funded by anyone, okay? Except philanthropic trusts and small donations from banks here and there. So it's now in the hands of Minister Fiona Richardson, and I'm awaiting, to be called so that then, we'll see what will come out of it. We want to see it rolled out in every local community because it will help all women. By the way, in our Women's Friendship Cafe, it's very diverse. We have Anglo-Saxon women and women from different cultures, as well as Aboriginal women. So now, in that space, organizationally, I feel I have achieved, something. But personally, of course, it had a toll on my personal relationship, So I married for love. After 24 years of marriage, we have to separate, okay? And I guess, it happens, when you grow apart. Okay? And so I'm single, and for the first time, I'm finding myself in a very nice space, I don't know if those who came out of divorce here, it's really lovely to be single. It's really great. You go home, you don't need to cook for anyone. Yeah? You don't need to think about anyone else but yourself. Now I'm listening to music, I've discovered Spotify, and so I go to parties. I always have somewhere to go. And so I'm loving the space that I'm in now, and I wish that all the women that are with me in the organization will come to realize further on that they don't need to put those stresses in their lives. Thank you.
Our next panellist is Tammy Anderson. Tammy is an award-winning actor and playwright. She was the first recipient of the Uncle Jack Charles Award and the Uncle Bob Mazza Award. She has many, many theatre credits to her name, including I Don't Want to Play House, which in its 16th year is the longest-running show in the country. Tammy is an ambassador for Cancer Council Victoria, and she's also on the board of Songline's Aboriginal Music Corporation. Please welcome Tammy Anderson.
I can do that because I'm solo. No, in all seriousness, I've been crying all day thinking, how am I going to approach this evening? Because I'm not acting, I'm me. My name is Tammy Anderson, and I am a proud Tarulaway woman from Tasmania. I survived the Black Line, and here, thank you very much. So coming from Van Diemen's Land with a big mob of convicts and murderers and rapists and blackfellas, what hope did I have? My father was a beautiful man who sadly had a very... If people know my story, I Don't Want to Play House, they know my story. So Dad, blackfella, Mum, Irish English. I grew up in a world of housing commission, sex, drugs, rock and roll, domestic violence and child abuse. But fortunately, I had a great imagination, and I would save all the children and put them in the back of the car and take them on magic journeys to get away from reality. I lived in a world where my poor mother was searching for love in the wrong places, and unfortunately she didn't find it. And when you're growing up in these households and living with trauma, it's a fucking horror movie when you're that big. So I have generational trauma running through my DNA. Have survived, didn't have time to think about feminism or whatever. I think the F word for me is fighting. So I've had to fight my way all my life, and I escaped Tasmania when I was like in 19, I think, came to Melbourne, and I was reading the newspaper one day, and there was a course advertised at Swinburne University. I had 2 young children. My husband wanted to stay home and grow hydroponics. And I thought, well, I want to educate myself. So I went along to Swinburne University and thought, I'm going to give this acting thing a go. I got into the course. I met John Bolton, a wonderful man, one of the good ones, who gave me a scholarship to his training school in Williamstown, and it changed my life. I became involved in the arts with Lubidgery Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Theatre Company, and I've worn every hat possible, from general manager to secretary to actor to whatever, treasurer. We put together that wonderful performance called Stolen, and thank you very much. Thank you. By Jane Harrison. And travelled the world doing 485 shows, longest running cast member for 5 years. I retired in Japan with millions of tears in my eyes I needed to heal. And during that time, I started writing my story. I remember one day I literally put the bong down. Don't judge me. It's better than all that what do you call it, those Xannies and things that people take, Valiums. I put the bong down and I started writing, and I wrote pages and pages and pages of secrets. And when I read these secrets, I was like, oh my God, this is my life. But those secrets allowed another door to open, and I continued through the darkness, and I showed John Bolton, and he was like, oh my God, I want more. This is a wonderful piece of art. So we went for funding, the only funding I've ever received actually, like $10,385, something like that, and shared it with other people, and I wrote an amazing story. I think it's amazing. I'm still doing it 16 years later. But has travelled the world. It has been to countries where they do not speak English. I've presented at the Highlander Centre where Martin Luther King did his teachings. I've stood in sweat lodges with Native American Indians. I've been to men's prisons, women's prisons, crack houses, the Opera House, everywhere. Never asked for anything. I've done this all by myself. But the sad thing is that in my community, this story resonates so deeply. My soul is full of a nation's trauma, because when I share my soul, I unzip and I share my story, and that allows everybody else to tell their story. So I'm going to continue on with that yarn. I do other things as well. I've been in the Sapphires, and I did a film called Boxing Day. I do radio, I'm writing a musical, blah, blah, blah. But this work is my legacy. And next week, I've been invited to present to 100 judges, magistrate, in a tiny little church. I presented 3 20-minute excerpts, right, and they were crying, like these grown men. And I'm thinking, you've got to see the whole show, you fellas. So, but schmoozing with the right people, the politicians, the right people, the CEOs. I have presented this work to so many amazing audiences, just not in the theatre, out there where it needs to be told. And so they ring up and they said, do you think it's appropriate that we put on I Don't Want to Play House in a church? And I said, well, I think it's time that your God and I have a little bit of a yarn. And I was thrilled last week when Mr. Pell, or whatever you call him, stuffed up. So I'm really looking forward to that exchange. But this is a profound experience for me to present to these people, because I've now got the power. And during those 3 20-minute performances for the magistrate, they actually swung it around and asked me, how can I help them understand? And they said, you have triggered our brain from looking at the adults and their arguments, and you've made us think of the children. And I said, well, that's where I write from, through the eyes of a child. So next week I get to go in and have a full performance in front of 100 judges, and they're asking me how to help them with their decision-making around domestic violence, rape and child abuse. And And to back that up, I am actually the first artist ever in the history of Australia to stand before the magistrate to present a piece of work. And that's just groundbreaking. And I still pinch myself to this day. I was in the kitchen today with my beautiful daughter. I'm going to be a grandmother on the 1st of July. And I started crying, and she's like, why are you crying, Mum? You missed the feminist thing and you missed the plot and you're going off about this. And I said, no, this is all relevant. It all means something. And I said, I was born in 1968, a human being. Prior to that, we were flora fauna. So, we've got to carry this cultural load every day. We just don't get to be an actor or a writer or a mum. We've got cultural community, responsibilities. We go to 5 funerals. We've got our own trauma to deal with. We've got our own family issues. If in this country, especially black fellas, not just women, but we're able to focus on one thing, just to be an actor or just to be a writer, my God, I would be famous. But I have to be an actor, writer, director, facilitator, stage manager, driver, lighting, costume, then go home and be a mum, raise my 3 children on my own. I worked my ass off and bought my own house and bought my own land back. But that's a huge thing. I'm 47 years of age. I'm a proud, very passionate, beautiful black woman, and it is a great honour to stand here. And I do hope that my First Nation sisters out there stick with me. We are very proud, and we've got to fight every day for our existence and prove who we are. and shove the lighter ones out to get cabs and whatever. But, like how is, it's so hard to exist in this country. 200 years we're talking. This is a country that lives on a history full of lies. I graduated Melbourne University last year with honours. I'm a master of writing, and I'm going to rewrite a lot of things and write new works. And I forgot the past. I have to move forward because it has held me back for so long. This is a new beginning, and I am honoured that I am a part of a mainstream event because I have walked into those big houses with new plays. How do you deal with the men that run these organisations? And being a black woman is even harder, as being a coloured woman from another country. But I thank you very much for your time. I'm getting over a flu. I've still got my Superman cape on, but I love you all dearly, and I hope that you support my work and buy my books and just look out for Tammy Anderson because she's going to kick ass. It's just the beginning. Thank you.
Our next panellist is Clementine Ford. Clementine is a writer, a speaker and a feminist thinker. She's a columnist with Daily Life and a regular contributor with The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald and many other publications. She is prolific on social media and has hundreds of thousands of followers, of which I am one. Please welcome Clementine Ford.
Sorry about that. I just really felt like I had to do that because I was so moved sitting there and listening to these incredible women. And I actually feel I'm not being falsely modest here, I feel quite ridiculous being the last one to follow that up because I would say arguably I definitely have the most privilege sitting on this stage. I'm a white woman for a start. I'm a middle-class woman. I'm educated. I've had all of the privilege that has been denied to so many other women. And I really appreciate, Jane, you pointing out that acknowledgement of all those different intersectionalities and the ways in which we need to step back sometimes. So I feel a little bit silly being the one to finish up here. Who am I? I was thinking as I was sitting there, who am I? I'm the granddaughter of a woman who was interned in a concentration camp and survived that, but who was so damaged that I'm also the daughter of a woman who was forced to leave school at 13 and become self-educated as a result of that. I'm, on the other side, the granddaughter of a woman who was, I believe, one of the first female academic professors in an Australian university, but who also lived in the country and had 5 children, whether or not by her own desire, I'm not sure, and would fill the bath up for them to have their weekly bath, and her husband would go first, then the eldest sons, then the daughter, and then lastly her. So when I think about that, I think about all of this enormous privilege that I've been raised with, but I think that one of the things that I can find commonality with everyone is the space that has been denied to women to operate and exist in, generally speaking. And I was thinking about this story yesterday, not for this, actually, it was separate to this, but it's kind of relevant as well. And it was, I guess one of the things we're talking about tonight is that evolution to feminism, whether or not it was a straight path or whether or not it kind of came through lots of different experiences. Now, as a teenager, I was the quintessential woman who would say, well, of course I believe in women's rights, but I wouldn't call myself a feminist. Because I was really scared that if I called myself a feminist, no one would ever want to have sex with me. Now, it turned out that they didn't want to have sex with me anyway. So I thought, oh, well, I may as well become a feminist then. But it was kind of a hard road because despite having grown up with, quite a large proportion of privilege, there was still a differentiation between the way that my brother was treated in our house and the way that my sister and I were treated. And they were little things. They're not, I'm not going to stand up here and say that they're equal to other kinds of oppressions that people have suffered, but it was things like, it was just expected that my sister and I would do the household chores because, of course, girls are born into this world knowing how to scrub things. It's like we just pop out of the womb and then we say, hand me some rubber gloves, there's a lot of blood to clean up here, and I want to get started. But my brother was just allowed to get away with not doing things because it was explained to me that if he did it, my mother would just have to do it again because I can trust you girls to do a good job. And I would get so mad at this kind of like pre-feminist young teenage girl. I was so mad at this idea that somehow it was just expected that we would take on these responsibilities and that there would never be a second chance for us to do it poorly because we would just have to do it again. And then when I was 21 years old, I was sitting at a bus stop on my way to university one day, and I was minding my own business and I was just putting on some chapstick. And this guy walked past, and he was a lot older than me, not that the age really matters, but he was a lot older than me, and he wasn't catching the bus. He was literally just walking past me and felt like it was completely his right to say as he walked past me, "You're going to need a lot more than that, love." And I mean, now, like that's almost kind compared to the things that I receive on a daily basis. It was quite sweet, you know. Oh, thanks, mate. But you know, as a 21-year-old young woman with the same kind of self-esteem issues that many 21-year-old women have, it really cut me very deeply. And I remember feeling it wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that, but I remember that incident distinctly because it stayed with me for so long, this sense of just being reminded once more that you're not allowed to sit even at a bus stop without someone deciding that they can tell you whether or not you have a right to be there. And I think that that's one of the things that a lot of women have a common experience of, is the sense that we have to pay a tax of some kind in order to participate in the world around us. You know, as a writer now who has a reasonably public social media presence, I feel like I'm quite confident in my appearance because I've had to be, because it's the first thing that, in fact, in lots of cases, it's the only thing that people will pick on as opposed to engaging with my ideas. They'll just call me fat and ugly because, of course, if you're a fat and ugly woman, then that's the worst thing that you can possibly be and you don't have a right to speak or participate in the world. So it was something that really struck me at the time as being this reminder that to participate, you always had to give them something else. To feel like someone would sit there and listen to you speak and share your ideas and share your experience, you had to at least be pretty enough for them to make it worth their while. And I was reminded of that again a couple of months ago when I was in Sydney. And has anyone been in Sydney and gone to the Coogee Women's Baths? Well, if you haven't been to the Coogee Women's Baths, it's an incredible experience and I highly recommend it, and you must do it the next time you go to Sydney, the first thing you do, even if it's freezing cold. Because the Coogee Women's Baths, I think, are almost or just over 100 years old, and it's a secluded spot on the beachfront where only women and children under 12 can swim. And it's a beautiful experience because a lot of women go there and they're allowed to swim topless and they're allowed to be free in a way that we don't really feel free necessarily swimming at a normal beach or a public beach. And I went there this particular day and it was a beautiful hot day and it was packed full with women of all ages and all shapes and sizes. And I had a chat with a woman on the way in, and I estimate her age to have been about 70. And she was sitting there, she sounded like she was from New Jersey, and she was just enjoying the sun, topless, big stomach hanging out, just not a care in the world. And I thought, she's a cool lady. And I went back to my Facebook page and I posted a photograph of just the baths. And I said, you know, this is a really special place and I love going here, and I urge everyone to go here if they've never been before. And of course, this was, the fact that women have a bath that they can go to in Sydney at the beach that men can't go to is the height of oppression. And a lot of comments ensued after that about how it was, well, this isn't what equality looks like. Why do women have their own bath to go to? Why don't men have it? And I said, well, there's literally another bath 100 metres up the road that everyone can go to. So you're not being denied anything. But it was this sense, in the same way that a lot of men get upset about there being International Women's Day and argue, well, when's International Men's Day? And you're like, well, it's November 19th and every day of the year. But the fact that they don't know that there's actually an official day to mark International Men's Day means that they don't really care about there being an International Men's Day. They just don't like the idea of women having an International Women's Day. In much the same way that these people who are complaining don't really care about whether or not men can go and swim privately with each other. They just don't like the idea of women being able to do it. And the reason that that's relevant is because that same woman that I spoke to sitting on that wall would, if her photograph were taken and put on social media, would elicit hundreds of comments about how disgusting she was and how she shouldn't be out there looking like that, and, oh, it's disgusting, no one needs to see that. And it really drove home to me that it's not about the space that women take up that people can't see. It's the fact that women are taking up space at all in a way that's not been approved of by the general status quo and the general patriarchal idea of what a woman should do in order to earn the right to that space. If you said, well, I understand that you don't like the women's baths because you think that it's unfair, and yet at the same time you don't want to see this woman on the beach, what are you really saying? You're saying that she should stay at home. You're saying that you and your experience of the world shouldn't have to be exposed to things that you don't like. And what you're really saying is that the only purpose that women have is as some kind of way to exist to flatter you. And I feel like that is kind of, it's not the defining story of my feminism by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a story of my feminism and the ways in which I perceive space and the way that women can take it up and the way that we can reclaim it and not just ask politely for it, but take back what belongs to us in a way that has common threads amongst all women, because it doesn't matter where we've come from. We all have that experience of being told that we don't belong somewhere, or that we owe someone something, or that in order to have this thing, we need to give this thing up. So that's the only experience really that I can share today, and I feel enormously privileged to have been able to share this stage with these incredible women. And thank you all for coming, and thanks to Playback for inviting me, and looking forward to the performance. Thank you.
All right, now we have time for a Q&A. So I'm going to come out there with this little handheld mic. So if you have a question for a panellist, please raise your hand and I'm on my way. First question, fantastic.
Jane Gilmour.
To Jane, yes? There's mics down by the... Yeah, great.
Yep, does it... Okay, go. Hi.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong lady. This lady.
Tammy? Tammy?
Sorry, Tammy. I'm looking at the names here.
I don't even look like Jane. I don't even look like her.
I'm sorry.
I'm black, she's white. Jeez, what's going on? I don't know, I'm kidding, Jane, I'm sorry.
No, it's just you've got better lipstick
no more
than
comedy.
me.
I am funny, but I'm trying to be serious. Sorry.
You mentioned that you had an opportunity to make a real difference in talking to 100 judges.
I've made a big difference talking to the world, but this is just a little cherry on top. Yes, this is the climb for me,
Do you
yes.
think there's been a lot of stress on your shoulders to come up with solutions? These are men who are paid to do their job, but they're asking you. There's a lot of stress on your shoulders. Have you got an idea what to tell them?
I'm just going to show them. I said to them the other day, I come in with my little piece of theatre and they were very traumatised by a 20-minute excerpt. And then, they're sitting there, too confronting. I'm like, are you serious? You are a grown man sitting in a court dealing with people's lives. My position as an artist is to make you feel this story, and that's what I do. I make them feel. It's not a huge thing on my shoulders. It's actually liberating for me as a woman to talk about these secrets that nobody wants to talk about. And yeah, I'm not really concerned if they're upset or whatever.
But
But
being employed by them, are they going to pay you?
absolutely, and I am my own. And as long as I'm paying the bills, I'm the boss. I think B.B. King said that. But I've set a mighty fine fee for myself. I can't fit within the theatrical world. I've 16 years of telling this story. I tap on $500 every year. So I get paid a nice fee. But it's not about the money. This is a great story, and it's groundbreaking, and I'll do this until my hips don't move anymore. People keep saying, hand the story over, let other people tell that yarn, but it won't ever be the same because it's my truth. But one day I do need to let other cultures tell this yarn, and I've just written a new work called Wild, and it's obviously the aftermath of I Don't Want to Play House, but being an autobiographical work, it was very confronting, and my family were very upset, and I had lots of stuff happen behind scenes. But I had to protect myself, my family, my mum, my sisters, my brother. So this time around, the character's name is Woman, and it can be every woman. And I look forward to the companies that may produce it. I want to be the first person to do the show and give myself a gig. And it can be a 3-hander, it can be a 5-hander, it can be every culture of the world. So I'd hope that Mr. Matthew Lutton and Chris Mead, if you're in the building, take up this fabulous opportunity and put it on in every city. It's a groundbreaking work, and I'm very proud. I got 97 out of 100 off to Mr. Raimondo Cortese, so it's a good script. But, I had to walk into Malthouse the other day to a young, white, privileged man and sell myself again. I've got to sell my soul. How many times do I have to do this? And it's like, oh, my God, can you just put the work on? I've got a 16-year audience waiting for what next. And Tammy Anderson's got to be the producer, the actor, the writer, the this. Somebody help. Let us be a part of this community. And we have amazing stories. We do world-class art. I work for Cancer Council, going around with this crazy little show called The Great Walls of Vagina. And it works. I'm a lady, I pretend I'm French, I put on a red dress, I have an accent, and I talk about PAP screens because our women are dying because they're not having the basic health care that they need. And I've just been picked up for the International Cancer Congress in Brisbane to go and talk about, Fanny. But that's my character's name, Fanny Labia Majora, anyway, whatever. I should be doing a show, actually. This is really hard to talk. But, my works are works that, I want to penetrate my audience. I want to make a difference, and I want to speak a truth. And I'm sorry if I upset people and confront them, but isn't that why we do theatre? Isn't that why we speak? Isn't that why we have a voice?
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you so much.
Where are you?
I'm over here.
Oh, God! Yeah, take the microphone off me.
Any more? Here's a hand. Good.
And this is my biggest fan here. Oh no, Jan.
It's probably... Oh, thank you. Probably for the whole panel, I think. Maybe particularly Clementine and Jane. But also for Tammy, I think, too. And everybody. Everyone answer this question.
It's for everyone but Melba.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Clementine, I think. What role do you think that social media has to play in promoting feminism? Do you think it's a useful tool, or do you think it can be open to manipulation by groups that perhaps don't have the best interests at heart?
Overwhelmingly, I think that social media is a positive tool. I think that it exposes a lot of repulsive, disgusting behaviour that can hide behind anonymity. But for me, the powerful thing about using things like Twitter and Facebook has been... someone once said to me, and I think it's a really, really wise thing about social media, and she said, it's not often about the people you're having the conversation with, but the people who are listening. And for me, if I'd had someone modelling conversations with people who tried to silence them when I was younger, I would have probably come to feminism a lot earlier, and I would have felt a lot more confident and positive in speaking out. Because it took me a long time to not be afraid of doing those things. And a lot of... I don't think it's speaking out of turn to say that a lot of young women are afraid to talk up because of things like, physical insults or insults about their mental health, all these things that people pick on that have nothing to do with their actual argument, but that are designed to undermine us and to make us feel like we're a piece of shit. And prior to social media, I think that the effect that had was to keep people silent and to keep women silent especially. And even though that's the intention now of people who use social media in a negative way, when you can see large armies of women who are rejecting that, and the best way I think to reject it is not through earnest arguments back, but by laughing at them, then it becomes this really powerful tool. I know that I feel very buoyed by seeing other women speak back to trolls and to assert themselves. And I especially love it when they use humour to do it, because there's nothing that those people hate more than being laughed at. And I think it's really funny that oftentimes one of the accusations that... I mean, there was this... For anyone who uses Twitter, there was this ridiculous hashtag that some conservative people in America tried to start today, and they called it hashtag the triggering, because they've got this big problem with trigger warnings, and they think that social justice warriors, like that's like a really bad insult apparently, to care about social justice. And also funny because so many of them include the word warrior in their tags, like truth warrior, sword warrior. So they started this hashtag called the triggering, and it was supposed to be about laughing at SJWs and saying, you know, it's just like repetitive stuff about like, oh, do you need your safe space? Do you need your safe space? Or are you triggered? I have not met a group of people who need a safe space more than men's rights activists who don't want to be criticised for anything that they think. I mean, the fact is that, like, some of you may know that at the end of last year I got a man fired because he wrote something not even super aggressive on my Facebook wall, but he just happened to write something that was vaguely aggressive, and his Facebook page included his workplace. So I just sent the comment to his workplace, and they saw all of the other racist stuff that he had on his page, and they were like, well, we don't want this man working for us. They exercised their rights as an employer and their social media policy, and they terminated his contract. And months later, I still have men from America who do not know this man, but who care very deeply about the way that feminists are ruining the world, writing to me and in really aggressive ways about how I got a man fired. I didn't care about his wife and children before Christmas. He's not married and he has no children. They've just manufactured a family for him. And at the time, someone said to me, you won't stop until all men are fired. And I was like, would that I had the power. But, I mean, it's also funny because on the one hand, they'll say to you that you have no power and feminism is dying and that's why you're so angry. And yet I have all of this extraordinary influence over workplaces. So in response to that, I said, jokingly, I won't stop until all men are fired, ... into the sun. And that was screen capped and seriously used by people as evidence of how I was manufacturing a plot to kill men. And so I went with that and I joked about how did you find out about the cannon that I'm building in the desert, to the sun cannon. And then recently a young kid tweeted at me and he said, you hate men. And I said, well, you know, I thought, oh, he's young. I'll try and engage with him. Maybe his mind can be changed. And I said, well, what makes you think that I hate men? And he said, well, you want to fire all of them into the sun. And I was like, okay, do you think that possibly that could have been a joke? And he said, but you said it. And I said, okay, but do you really think that the likelihood is that I'm building a cannon in the desert to fire men into the sun, or that maybe I was joking? And he repeated again, but you said it. And I realised then that actually there's a whole group of these people, especially the ones who go on about triggering and trigger warnings and mock SJWs for needing a safe space, who cannot conceive of the fact that a feminist might make a joke about a man because they're not used in any situation to men being the butt of humour. So for me, I feel like that's where social media is a real positive, is that not only does it give you control back over the people who've always mocked you into silence before you were maybe strong enough to handle that, but also it shows other people how ridiculous they are. And I will wrap up very quickly, I promise, but the analogy that I like to use is that they're like a boggart in a closet. And if anyone hasn't read Harry Potter, a boggart is a creature that hides in a closet or a dark space, and it can't kill you, but when you look at it, when you release the boggart, it will take on the image or the body of the thing that you fear most. And of course, for a lot of people, trolls online are the thing that they fear most because they use the tactics of the things that they fear most, which is to insult women's bodies, to insult women's sexuality, their mental health, etc., etc. But the only way to destroy a boggart is to keep laughing at it and to get more and more people to laugh at it until it kind of combusts. And that's kind of what happens on social media, I find, and that's certainly what I try and do, is just destroy them through laughter. And they hate it.
Thank you, Clementine. All right, we've got time for one more. And can it be for Jane or Melba? That'd be great over here. Okay. But if you have more questions or more things you want to say, this is not the end of that, because we have a whole nother session where we're going to hear from much more people in the audience.
And you can shout us wine if you like, and we'll talk. No.
Yeah, and these ladies will be here, so you can ply them with wine.
Hi, thanks so much all of you for sharing such inspiring stories. Jane, I was going to ask you if you... I won't. It's for the whole panel, but whoever would like to answer the question, something that was very evident to me hearing you all speak was an enormous sense of pride in your achievements. And even though there were some moments of self-deprecation, I think one of the problems with women as a whole, young women, is a need to downplay what they've achieved and what they do. And there's a lot of evidence, articles, opinions that say that men tend to have more confidence to ask for what they want, to demand more. What do you think we can be doing to encourage women to really shout out and celebrate what they're good at, instead of trying to play it down and, hide their achievements and their strength?
That's a really good question, and it's something that I think most of us get as we get older. That I know when I was younger, I would definitely apologise more and placate more and allow people to take credit for my ideas, all that stuff that young women go through. And now, Jesus, you want to try it? Hell no. Because as you get older, you get stronger in yourself, and you care less. But I also think that because I came later to it, it took me longer to learn that. What Clem was saying before about what girls and women are seeing online now, I know my daughter at 16 is far more able to speak up for herself and think for herself than I was. And it is about what I was talking about before, about making your world bigger. So also in relation to the question before about social media, is seeing women having those spaces. The thing that we can do with the digital world now is we don't need to fight men out of the way. We can just make those spaces for ourselves and share them. And I make a real policy now of, I will share articles written by women, I will share books written by women, I will share music and films and events like this, because the more girls and young women see what women are doing and look at it and go, wow, that's really awesome, and hear women like Tammy saying, yeah, I'm good, damn straight. And that becomes the norm, instead of women going, oh, I'm really sorry, but I wrote this thing, would you mind? I've been an editor for a long time, and I would get this all the time. You'd go to women who have incredible expertise in their area and say, can you write something for me? And they'd say, look, this other person, she's got a master's in this. I think she'd probably be better. And then you get emails from blokes going, I don't know anything, but this is awesome. And you'd say, no, that's really no good. What do you mean it's no good? That's awesome. What do you mean you don't want to publish me? What's wrong with you? And they would want to know what was wrong with me, that I didn't want to publish them. And the women who were incredible, knowledgeable, fantastic women were apologising for the fact that I had asked them to write something. And so again, I think it's just that constantly reinforcing the amazing things that women do and reminding all women that we don't need to apologise for being really great at what we do.
Thank you.
I guess I'm dealing with a different crowd of women. But generally, we do not want to talk about our achievements, isn't it? I mean, whether you're an Anglo-Saxon or Aboriginal woman or, woman of colour. And the problem with the women of colour is, of course, we do have problems about English, okay? And because our dominant language here is English, they feel even more inferior with the fact that they cannot speak the way you speak. So what we do in the Women's Coalition is, through our Women's Leadership course, we would like to be able to actually conduct the 7-day women's leadership course in their language. Because they need to still be educated about women's rights, and they need to know about pathways, by which they will be able to find that, they have a skill in small business, or they have a skill in, doing crafts, because anything that you're good at will make you feel good. And that is what we try to do. But it's really a long haul for us, because we're in Australia, where English is the dominant language. How I wish, there will be a situation when you, English speakers, will actually be so exposed to accented English that you're not going to tell us anymore, can you speak slowly? Can you, that's that very, undermining way sometimes when you find a woman of color and think that, they do not have the right English to speak to you. It will be great if you can actually develop, that hearing capacity to listen to different accented English and say, that's a Cambodian woman. I think her accent is Cambodian. I think her accent is, I will not say Indian because they're so easily, identified. But, those different nuances of languages, because it will enrich us more to be able to actually, be attuned to different accents and not just the Australian English. And it will help, women like us, to feel we belong, because we will not be anymore be feeling that, we're not doing well here. I cannot be understood. Okay? So, yeah, I guess that's my answer for that.
Thanks, Melba.